I helped a woman escape her gold-digging boyfriend. After he dumped her at a bar, she was paying for their hotel room all along. This occurred several years ago, but I was just reminded of it. So here it is, Reddit. I spent several years working as a front desk agent for a prominent luxury hotel chain. One specific hotel where I was employed was situated very close to the downtown area, which resulted in a high influx of young, affluent business professionals who enjoyed partying. I typically worked the second and third shifts, which allowed me to witness numerous drunken encounters, breakups, infidelities, escorts, and much more. However, there is one particular incident that I will always remember. I was attending to guests at the front desk when a group of well-dressed young men entered. They had all clearly been drinking, but they were not so inebriated that they couldn't walk correctly or engage in a conversation. One of the men approached me and explained that while he and his friends were at the bar, a woman was flirting with him. Even after he declined her advances multiple times, she persisted. So, he and his friends left, but it was not until they got into an Uber that he realized he no longer had his room key. He suspected that she had taken it and was worried she might come up to his room. He requested that I deactivate his keys and ensure that she would not be allowed access to his room if she showed up. As he relayed this information to me, I felt a sense of unease. He and his friends were all smirking and sharing amused glances with one another. He provided me with a detailed description of the woman unprompted, including her height, body shape, hair color, and the style of dress she was wearing, all while speaking in a derisive tone. This could have easily been attributed to him finding the entire situation amusing or being too drunk to take it seriously, but something about it just seemed off to me. Regardless, I followed the procedure I had been trained in when faced with such circumstances. I accessed his reservation, deactivated the keys as he requested, issued him a new set after verifying his identification, and even offered to relocate him to a different room if that would make him feel safer. He and his friends exchanged a few chuckles at that suggestion, and he declined, taking the keys and heading to their room. Approximately an hour later, the woman he had described appeared. By this time, my relief for the night had also arrived and was stationed at the front desk, while I was in the back office counting my cash drawer. I hadn't had the chance to inform him about the woman. Just as I was exiting the back office with my bag, I noticed my colleague buzz the doors open, allowing the woman to rush in and navigate straight through the lobby toward the elevators. She was barefoot, holding her high heels, and appeared to know exactly where she was heading. I hurried over to my coworker and told him what the earlier man had said regarding her. My colleague looked at me with confusion. He then pointed to the screen that displayed the reservation and informed me that when the woman arrived, her room keys did not work. He had asked for her room number and last name, which she provided, and her name was indeed on the reservation. Upon examining the reservation, I noted that there was a woman's name listed in the notes. The prior man was identified as the primary guest, but her name was also included as a secondary guest, with his consent to be in the room. I was perplexed, considering that she might not have been the same woman he described. However, to be cautious, I contacted the man in his room and explained the situation, mentioning that we allowed a woman matching the description he provided to enter the hotel, as her name was confirmed on the reservation. He laughed, stated that he forgot her name was linked to the room, and requested that I remove it. At this point, I felt even more confused and sought clarification. Sir, just to confirm, the woman you encountered at the bar earlier this evening was the same one who was allowed access to the room during check-in, but now you are saying she is not welcome. Him, laughing with his friends in the background. Awa. Guys, I confused the poor girl. Turning back to me on the phone. Yeah, sweetheart, she's not allowed in the room. Just take her name off the reservation. Me. Understood. So if she's no longer authorized to stay in the room, would you like us to call the police to have her removed from the property? Him. Ha. Whoa, that's too extreme. Don't worry, she'll figure it out soon enough. We ended the call, and my suspicions grew regarding the situation. I instructed my coworker to refrain from taking any action, as I planned to remain at the desk for a while to monitor the developments. Not long after, the woman emerged from the elevator, tears streaming down her face, sobbing while on the phone with someone. She settled down in our lobby, and my coworker and I attempted to keep busy while discreetly listening to her phone conversation. She was weeping to her mother and sister. From what I gathered, she had been invited to spend the week with her boyfriend as he reconnected with his college friends. On their first night together, they all gathered for dinner and drinks. After a while, she went to the restroom, and upon returning, she caught her boyfriend flirting with another woman. His friends had bet he wouldn't do it, and when she confronted him in anger, he hurled a slew of insults at her, humiliating her in front of his friends and everyone present at the bar. All his friends joined in on belittling her, and he scornfully told her that she was nothing without him, before breaking up with her on the spot. He and his friends subsequently left in an Uber, leaving her stranded at the bar with no money or means of transportation back. She had to rely on her phone's GPS to walk back to the hotel from the bar, barefoot. Wearing heels for that distance would have been impractical. She was pleading with her mother and sister for assistance, stating that he was preventing her from entering the room to retrieve her belongings or her wallet. My heart ached for her. I felt terrible. I had inadvertently aided this man in treating this poor woman poorly, and now he and his friends were laughing at her while she sobbed in our lobby, utterly alone. I went over to the snack area in the lobby, grabbed a bottled water and brought it to her. I informed her that I had overheard her conversation and expressed my sympathy for her plight, asking if she would like assistance. I mentioned that if he was keeping her from accessing her belongings, we could contact the police to intervene and retrieve her items, or if she preferred, we could arrange a low-rate room away from him if her mother or sister could cover the cost. She expressed her gratitude, accepted the water, and began to compose herself while discussing her situation and options with me. Eventually, we decided she would stay at the hotel for the night and determine her next steps in the morning. As we approached the desk, she inquired if I could run her credit card to see if there were sufficient funds for a new room. I asked her what she meant by new room, and she explained that she was actually the one paying for the room they were in. Although his name was on the reservation because he booked it, it was her card covering the expenses. This piqued my interest. I asked her why she was covering the room if it was in his name. She explained that she was the one with a job, whereas he had been unable to secure employment in his field since graduating from college and was effectively living off his parents' finances. However, soon after they began dating, his parents cut him off, leaving him reliant on her support. This explained her confusion and frustration at his behavior throughout the evening. He had been sweet and attentive back home, but upon reuniting with his friends, he had completely changed and was no longer the same person. I wanted to inform her that it was evident he was using her for her money and would likely blame his friends for his behavior, attempting to reconcile later. However, I doubted she would want to hear unsolicited advice from a complete stranger regarding her personal life. Instead, I proposed a form of revenge. I informed her that since she was technically paying for the room, if she could provide proof that her card was on file along with some form of photo identification and the last 4 digits of the card number, which was all my hotel required, then she could kick him out of the room and retain it for herself. Additionally, as a kind gesture given her unfortunate night, if she could confirm she was indeed the one responsible for the payments, I would be thrilled to offer her a complimentary luxury upgrade to our largest suite, complete with full access to all hotel amenities, and I would even arrange to have champagne and fresh strawberries sent to her room. She was genuinely taken aback by the proposal, appearing tempted yet hesitating. Then, I clarified that upgrading her room would necessitate moving her belongings, meaning she would need to vacate her current room immediately. If anyone remained in the room after we had requested them to leave, we would be obligated to have them escorted off the premises, or they would have to pay for the room. The choice was theirs. She contemplated this, pulled up her banking app, and showed me the screen, which displayed her photo, her full name, the card's number, and the hold placed by our hotel for the room. She asked if that sufficed. It was more than adequate for me. I quickly upgraded her, transferred everything in our system, and before I could say anything to my coworker, he was already gathering a set of master keys, a bell cart, and asking her what her luggage looked like so he could retrieve it for her and deliver it to her new room. He wanted to ensure she would not have to encounter her ex again. She smiled and described which bags were hers, mentioning that she hadn't unpacked yet. My colleague rushed down to the elevators to collect her belongings while I prepared her new set of keys and directed her to her upgraded room. As soon as she stepped into the elevator, my phone at the front desk began to ring. It was her ex-boyfriend, furious about my coworker taking her items. I calmly explained that I was unable to disclose any private information pertaining to our guests, and that if he wished to remain in his room, he would need to arrange payment since there was no longer a valid method of payment linked to his reservation. He, totally, lost it. He made a variety of demands while shouting at my colleague to cease what he was doing, but it was evident from his yelling that my coworker was ignoring him. I could even hear his friends advising him to calm down and simply pay for the room. I then informed him that we would grant him a courtesy period of 10 minutes to make a decision. If he did not have a payment method ready within that time frame, he would have to vacate the premises, or we would be compelled to involve the authorities to evict him. He persisted in shouting at me, screaming, cursing, threatening, and making a ruckus for a full minute before pausing for breath. I then reminded him he had 9 minutes remaining and inquired whether he had reached a conclusion. He abruptly hung up on me. 9 minutes later, I called the room, but he didn't answer. I called again, still no response. On my third attempt, he picked up, only to hang up immediately once more. I contacted the police and explained the situation, and they assured me they were on their way. The officers arrived, and I briefed them on what had transpired. Together, we headed to the room, where the man and his friends turned pale upon seeing the police. The officers informed the ex-boyfriend and his companions that they were being evicted. The ex-boyfriend attempted to speak with me, but the officers directed him to only communicate with them. I had previously informed them about his attitude over the phone. At this point, the friends were all offering to cover the cost of the room, and the officers looked to me for guidance on whether that would be acceptable. With a sweet smile, I replied, "No," and the officers nodded, hastily moving to ensure they gathered the men's belongings and vacated the room. The ex-boyfriend was the last one to exit, carrying 2 bags and complaining about not having a luggage cart to assist him while his friends glared at him in frustration. I accompanied the officers as they escorted all of them out of the establishment and encountered my coworker in the lobby. He waited until the group was outside in the parking lot to inform me that the woman was in her new room, thrilled with the upgrade, and had declined the champagne offered, stating she just wanted to sleep. Although I didn't have the opportunity to see her before she left town the following day, the ex-boyfriend made multiple attempts to call our hotel to lodge complaints and even tried to leave negative reviews online, filled with lies. I genuinely hope she never has to deal with him again. Thank you all so much for the awards. It's only been 1 day, and I'm overwhelmed by how much this story has resonated with people. I usually share my hotel experiences in our Tales from the Front Desk, but I felt this one belonged here as well, so I decided to post it first. I am glad I did, and I plan to repost on that platform too. Thank you all once more for the affection. I have many unpleasant experiences from working in the industry, but very few heartwarming stories, and this is my only tale of sweet revenge. I am truly pleased that you all enjoyed it. Thank you. 2. I wanted to respond to some points raised in the comments. 1. I'm unsure why she didn't use Uber instead of walking, perhaps due to the distress of the moment and not thinking of it. Honestly, if you ever find yourself in a similar predicament, regardless of the public humiliation, don't hesitate to ask staff for help. They may think of solutions you might overlook during a panic, or they might even be kind enough to cover an Uber fare for you. I have assisted people with this many times while working in hotels. There is no shame in reaching out for assistance. 2. The credit card issuer is Capital One. I wasn't going to mention it to avoid potential issues with specific company names, as some subreddits can flag stories for this reason. However, their app allows you to display a profile picture, and in most banking or credit card applications, you have access to the full card number through the account information. Yes, technically, I shouldn't have accepted her information as a form of identification, but given the awful evening she experienced, I didn't mind. Story 2. I quit my job, leaving my bully with zero prep for her shift. She ended up with a brutal 15-hour day and got fired. Satisfaction. This narrative took place quite some time ago, yet it has always held a unique significance in my memory, primarily due to the profound satisfaction I experienced from it all. It is rather extensive due to the background context, but I believe it is essential to comprehend why I reacted the way I did. The background. After completing my first year of college, I spent my summer working at a local fast food establishment. Almost all of my colleagues got along well with one another, creating an overall atmosphere that was generally positive and humorous, except for one individual. This individual was Nancy, an older woman in her 40s who ended up working alongside us. Typically, managing a workplace bully can be quite irritating, but Nancy appeared to feel superior to everyone else and nearly untouchable due to the fact that the restaurant manager was, in fact, her sister. This not only allowed her to bully and intimidate others at will, but it also meant that no escalation of her behavior resulted in any consequences. Since either she or her sister was in charge of the work schedules, Nancy was almost never assigned weekend shifts and would invariably leave work no later than 2:00 or 3:00 p.m. If anyone dared to respond to her or give her attitude, in response to her snide remarks or various actions, she would take great pleasure in scheduling them for weekend shifts on both Friday and Saturday nights, fully aware that they would be stuck working until around 11:30 p.m. or midnight while their friends were out enjoying themselves. Additionally, Nancy was exceedingly lazy. At our establishment, we had a significant amount of preparation to conduct. For example, the onion rings were made entirely from scratch, with no pre-prepared ingredients available. We crafted them using flour, milk, and other components, then stored them in long containers in the refrigerator, a process that could take a good hour or sometimes longer, depending on the required quantity. To manage a typical workday, about 4 containers were needed, and on busier nights like Saturdays, that number could rise to 6 or 8. Yet somehow, Nancy managed to produce 4 containers in roughly 20 to 30 minutes, but the quality suffered. If anyone commented that her batches resembled half-chewed onion rings, they were guaranteed extra shifts on the weekends or a night shift, followed by an early morning shift the next day. Another aggravating aspect was her habit of taking breaks. Whenever a large group of customers would come in while both of us were in the kitchen, she would dart out the back to take a smoke break, leaving me to handle everything on my own until all the orders were fulfilled. Afterward, she would return and criticize me for being too slow. Conversely, if I were on a break and a couple of customers came in, she would pull me from my break to prepare a side of fries or something similar. Finally, she was abusive, both verbally and physically. She would deliberately work in a way that risked injuring others and would blame them if they got hurt due to her actions. For instance, there was a moment when I was retrieving fries from the fryer container, and just then the timer for a new batch rang. While I was still handling the existing fry order, she took the fry basket and dumped everything onto my arms, resulting in burns from the fries and hot oil. I ended up with scars on my arms that lasted 5 to 7 years before finally fading away. Her response was, "Hurry up. You're too slow." At one point, she nearly stabbed a colleague with a knife because she was walking while holding it in a dangerous manner, with the tip pointing outward at waist level. Most normal individuals would recognize the danger in walking this way, but Nancy showed little concern and eventually bumped into someone. Her response was something like, "Watch where you're going, and this sort of thing wouldn't happen." Fortunately, the guy only suffered a minor cut. However, one of her favorite habits was to leave knives loose in the sink filled with water. Dropping knives and other sharp objects in with other items made cleaning hazardous, as one could easily get cut while searching for something in the water. The kitchen was perpetually chaotic and boiling hot, which did not help the situation. Strangely, she seemed to target me more than most others, and I could never quite grasp why, perhaps because I never allowed her to fully provoke me into losing my temper. It's a strange tendency some bullies have, targeting those who appear patient to see how far they can push before they explode, and then report them for inappropriate behavior in order to get them fired. At one point, a new employee started, and for some reason, she shifted her focus from me to him for 2 weeks. During that time, she made his life extremely difficult whenever they were on the same shift. Interestingly, those were the best 2 weeks I had at work in a long time. I felt genuinely sorry for the guy, knowing the struggles he faced. Once he left, she returned to making me her primary target, Fast forward a month and we arrive at the main event. Friday, we were exceptionally busy, far busier than usual, which resulted in me needing one extra person to assist me in the kitchen, Nathan. Technically, I was not the team leader or supervisor, but I had all the same authority, including the ability to determine whether we needed additional staff to come in or if someone could leave early due to lower customer volume. Overall, it was a challenging night for everyone. After closing the restaurant and completing various duties, we all finally went home after a long evening of work. Now, onto the significant day. Saturday, I arrived as usual around 12:50 p.m. for my 1:00 p.m. shift, only to be confronted immediately by an irate Nancy, who berated me for keeping an extra person the previous night. She claimed it wasn't that busy and complained that no overstock was prepared, insisting nothing was ready for the morning shift when she came in, even going so far as to say there were only about 12 orders all night. In reality, it was closer to 96, but sure, Nancy. This particular comment really struck a nerve, but I maintained my composure while I felt myself boiling inside. I made my rounds in the kitchen, greeting everyone as usual, then headed to the front to check in on the cashiers, where I found my friend Kristen in tears. Kristen had been the cashier closing the night before, and while Nathan and I managed the kitchen, she handled front counter duties. She explained that Nancy had just accused her of cash discrepancies, calling her a thief and claiming the monetary difference would be deducted from her paycheck, while also stating that she was in big trouble because she would be reported to the manager and potentially fired. I knew Kristen well. She was one of my good friends, and I was fully aware that this was not her doing. The entire situation pushed me past my limit. I was done being patient. Usually, we would support each other whenever Nancy threw her fits, but seeing my friend in such distress was simply too much. Typically, I maintain a level-headed demeanor and can endure abuse calmly, but there is one rule I live by: never, under any circumstances, mess with my close friends. This principle can sometimes lead me to overreact, especially when I aim to deliver a message. I assured Kristen that everything would be fine and came up with a plan. I gathered all the cashiers and cooks. Nancy had already left by that time, and shared my idea that night would be my final shift. However, since I still technically held a position as team leader, in a sense, they should still heed my instructions. When I presented my plan, everyone eagerly complied with my requests. I had the authority to dictate how much food to prepare, or in this case, how little to prepare. Nancy had just belittled me and called me a poor employee, and I was determined to prove her right. The plan. I instructed the kitchen staff to prepare only the bare minimum needed for the night, leaving no overstock for the following day except for breakfast items, as Nancy was responsible for most of the breakfast preparation. I wanted her to have ample leftovers for her next shift since she despised doing preparation work and would avoid preparing anything during evening shifts if she worked mornings. By the end of the night, it was almost poetic how everything was depleted. We were completely out of onion rings, diced onions, sliced onions, tomatoes, lettuce, and fries remained unpacked. Chicken was unprepared for the next day. Condiment containers were empty, and only a few burger buns were left, which we replenished to ensure there would be sufficient stock for breakfast. It's worth noting that, as a bad employee, for keeping people during slow periods, I offered Nathan and Matt the option to stay with me until closing if they had no other plans, and they both agreed, claiming that they had nothing else scheduled. To illustrate just how much stock was missing from the cooler, typically, 2 people could barely fit in there. However, during that night, one could stroll in there with arms wide open and turn around comfortably. The evening progressed as usual, oddly enough, and proved to be incredibly calm, with only 3 or 4 orders. When everything settled, I removed my apron, folded my work attire, and placed it in my unlocked mini locker, strategically putting my cap on top with a note intentionally sticking out. Sunday the following day, I decided to relax in town with my girlfriend at the time. When it got close to 12:55 p.m., I informed her that I had a call to make. Normally, I was scheduled to work from 1:00 p.m. until closing, but I knew Nancy was supposed to be working alongside me until 3:00 p.m., and I knew full well she would complete no prep work since I was not coming in, and would expect that I would handle all the preparation and orders while she took her smoke breaks. I called the restaurant, and Gwen picked up another older woman who usually worked mornings and was quite kind. The conversation went as follows me. "Hey Gwen, how are you?" "Gwen, I'm doing well, but where are you? You're usually here by now. I was starting to worry something happened." Me, "Oh, no worries, I'm all good. I just wanted to inform you that I won't be coming in today." Gwen, "Oh. What do you mean? What's going on?" Me, "I'm quitting." Gwen, "What? You can't do that 5 minutes before your shift. There's no prep completed. Why would you do this?" Me, "Just ask Nancy, she knows why. Also, tell her to check my locker because I left a note for her in there. Sorry, but I have to go now. Bye." I hung up and went on with my day, as if nothing in particular had occurred, enjoying my Sunday afternoon. The fallout, I received updates from coworkers on what transpired after my departure. Apparently, Gwen confronted Nancy about the situation and promptly contacted the owner, informing her about everything that had just happened. Nancy's sister's boss, Stacy, the owner, arrived within 20 minutes, and I learned that I had missed quite the spectacle. Reportedly, Stacy announced that Nancy would now be covering my shift, including all the preparation tasks required before she could leave. This effectively changed Nancy's shift from a 7:00 a.m. to a 3:00 p.m. schedule into a 7:00 a.m. to 10:00 p.m. shift, resulting in her working a grueling 15-hour day. Furthermore, Stacy had mandated that smoke breaks were entirely off limits. Nancy reportedly went pale upon hearing this news, and once Stacy departed, she retreated to the walk-in freezer to cry for about 5 minutes before emerging looking even worse due to the cold. Someone had to be called in to assist for the remainder of the day, resulting in a very frustrated crowd of customers since the restaurant had run out of nearly all menu items. The grievances on that day only exacerbated the entire situation. The most satisfying part of this experience was that Nancy's own daughter worked at the establishment, and she was present to witness her mother's exhausting day. Watching everything implode around her was quite satisfying, especially since her daughter was quite the opposite of her mother and struggled with her, enjoying the opportunity to laugh at her misfortune. Over the next 3 days, Stacy summoned all the staff to her office to gather reports on what transpired. Nancy and her sister were the last to be called in together, and ultimately, Nancy was fired for workplace bullying. However, the story doesn't end there. I had a friend an hour away who owed me a few favors. I provided him with Nancy's phone number, name, address, and car information, telling him to have fun. Even years later, he has refused to share exactly what transpired. While I wasn't present to witness the backlash against Nancy firsthand, I thoroughly enjoyed hearing about it from others. Following this episode, she experienced considerable difficulties finding a job, as word travels quickly in small towns. The best part is that when it came time for her to apply elsewhere, I revisited the restaurant and asked Stacy if she would serve as a reference for me. She agreed. Although my little stunt cost the establishment a considerable amount of money, she expressed that she actually appreciated my boldness. Every job I secured afterward cited Stacy as one of my best references, and I repeatedly received positive feedback regarding her. Apologies for the lengthy narrative. I hope you found it enjoyable. I certainly did. 10 out of 10, I would do it again. Regarding the note I left in my locker, I simply drew a happy face and wrote, "Have a good day," above it. Summary: I was bullied at my workplace by a supervisor. I quit my job, intentionally caused additional hours for the staff, led to the restaurant experiencing significant losses, made many customers unhappy, got a workplace bully fired by her sister's boss, and provided personal information on said workplace bully to questionable individuals solely to irritate her. Story 3. How do I 27M get over a situationship with a girl 25F after a year? Okay, so here's a lengthy one. I, a 27-year-old male, was involved in a situationship last year with a 25-year-old female for approximately 4 months, 2 of which were spent seeing each other in person, as she was a full-time student at the time aspiring to become a teacher. From our second date onward, I was essentially head over heels for her, and she appeared to be quite interested in me as well. We were intimate during our second meet-up, and she was very affectionate, essentially all over me. Initially, I dismissed this, thinking, okay, just because she loves physical touch doesn't mean she's romantically interested. even though I definitely was at that point. It wasn't until a couple of weeks after our third date that she noticed I had a matching tattoo with an ex-girlfriend of mine. Foolish move, I know. We laughed about it, and she suggested that I cover it up, telling me, "I'm waiting." We also looked each other up on Facebook, and she texted me, "It says you're single. Maybe I should change that." I'm still trying to comprehend why she would say such things if she wasn't seeking something serious with me. Would someone really joke about that? Instantly, I felt a surge of excitement, believing she was reciprocating my feelings. Sure, this was a somewhat odd comment to make to someone you've met just 3 times, but at this point, I was essentially in love, so I decided to pursue an official relationship with her. Immediately, I was met with, "I want to take this slow," followed by her recounting a very abusive and unfaithful ex with whom she had been for a year. I was confused because this didn't seem to align with how she had been texting me previously, but I opted to go along with it, thinking she merely needed time. We eventually had a phone conversation about our desires, and I made it clear once more that I wanted a relationship with her. She kept stating, "I don't know," and mentioned that although she thought I was a great guy, with school starting again for her, she wasn't focused on her love life. Again, I tried my best to understand and, in my misguided wisdom, told her I would wait for her to complete school and hopefully reconnect afterward. From that point on, we hooked up a few more times, and the last time I saw her in person was in January 2024. She became incredibly busy with school, and it became quite difficult to make plans, even though she was always open to ideas for meeting up again. Here's where I likely made mistakes. I'll acknowledge that when I have feelings for someone, I struggle to ease off the pace, and I did many things that I now believe made her feel quite pressured. I bought her gifts, and one time when she confided in me about her insecurities, I wrote a ridiculous list outlining all the reasons I thought she was beautiful. I cringed just thinking about it. She was very kind in response, saying things like, "You're almost too sweet," and "You're the sweetest, nicest guy I've met," but I never managed to see her again. She continued to express something along the lines of, "I can't give you what you want," which frustrates me because I still don't understand what that meant. Not that I wanted those things back, I just aimed to make her feel special. After she reiterated her desire to take things slow, I suggested we just be friends until her school was over, and she agreed. However, it didn't take long for her to start flirting immediately, calling me cute, sending me hearts, and rekindling all the feelings I had before. I tried to pull back, and she began flirting again. Odd, right? I ultimately told her in March that we should strictly be friends because I sensed that, despite all my efforts, she wasn't going to see me the way I wanted her to. She responded sweetly once more, stating, "I can't give you everything you're wanting," and that she's not looking for anything serious. That friendship did not last long, as I completely lost my mind trying to maintain a friendship with someone I was in love with, and we ended up completely cutting off contact. One of her last comments to me was, "I can't make myself feel something I don't, and for that, I'm sorry." I guess after a year, you would expect me to be over this, but I'm not. I think about her every single day, questioning what I might have done that transformed her from someone who seemed genuinely interested in me to someone who ultimately broke my heart. Each day, I overanalyze everything, wondering where I went wrong. She is now in another relationship with someone who looks like a bodybuilder, which, believe me, made me hit the gym consistently fast. She has repeatedly told me that I've done nothing wrong and that I'm not lacking anything, but all I hear are the words of someone trying to soften the blow. I simply do not understand. If she was physically attracted to me and said I was the sweetest guy she ever met, isn't that someone you would want to commit to? I'm suffering inside and honestly terrified of dating again. Firstly, I'm afraid that whatever my shortcomings were will affect someone else. And secondly, even though I generally don't have issues with women, I sincerely do not want anyone else even after a year. At this point, I still have feelings for this girl from a distance. I know many of you will criticize my behavior, and I accept that. My working theory is that she was into me and perhaps had genuine feelings, but that I rushed the relationship too quickly. But what do you all think? Was I naive, misinterpreting her messages of interest as something more than they actually were? How do I move on? Part of me believes I deserve this pain, as I must have done something wrong for the dynamics to change so drastically. Perhaps that's just my depression talking, but I genuinely wish I knew where I went astray.